The ever so-called progressive Doctor Who was back on the screens once again today to be marvelling in its glory of the remnants of what once was. Be it everlasting tears, be it a Doctor who is not the Doctor in the eyes of many people, RTD's stories truly are a shadow of what was once a glorious return for Doctor Who the first time around. His return with the specials and these two series are nowhere near the caliber of what he was able to produce first time round, and to be quite frank, this is so far the closest he has ever got to his old self. It makes me wonder if other writers were having an input behind the scenes during this first run at this rate. Hello and welcome back to Chat About It, Don't Shout About It. With me, Rachel, the Queen of the Woke, as crowned by one of my haters. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe to the channel, switch on the notification bells so that you know I am releasing another video. I'm trying to hit 2k subscribers. Can we do it? Thank you to everyone who has joined me already. I cannot run this channel without you. I cover Doctor Who on a Sunday and the woke news in the week. I will start by saying this. If you like Shooty as the Doctor and you like the story and you like the series and the last one and anything that Russell T Davies has done since his return, that's absolutely fine. I'm not about to start telling you what to like and not to like and what to watch and not what to watch. Okay, if you understand what I mean. And just because people disagree, it doesn't mean that we are haters. The Well is written by Russell T Davies and Sharma Angel Walfall. I will give you a synopsis and then I will give you my review. So, the Doctor still wants to get Belinda home. Belinda still wants to go home. However, nothing seems to be going according to plan. The Doctor begins making promises that he probably can't keep because the Doctor is pretty careless these days. They land 500,000 years in the future on planet 6767 that has suffered from galvanic radiation. They find out that they are on a rescue mission because 35 people were on this planet as part of a colony. They look around to see if they can find any life forms on board, and they found just one person by the name of Alice, who is played by Rose Ayling-Ellis. She is alone, she is injured, she is upset, and she just wants to get home to her daughter. However, they need to figure out why everybody else had died. It's a bit of a whodunit. One thing that was important to note that the unseen entity did not like mirrors, so all of the mirrors had been broken. Belinda stays with Alice to treat her injuries, and the Doctor goes with Shea and Cassio. They discover a well and a computer. They reactivate the computer and find the CCTV footage. Something unseen had escaped from the well. Whilst this is going on, Belinda notices something behind Alice. It's a blink and you'll miss it moment. This sends them all into a panic as they try to establish what is behind Alice. Alice does start eventually talking, but not before the Doctor returns. The Doctor asks Shea about the planet that they are on. She reiterates that it's called Planet 6767. The Doctor asks about planet Earth. They don't know what planet Earth is. However, they said that the planet they were on is also known as Carbon-46. The entire planet was made out of diamond and that they were in a diamond mine. That sound familiar to you? That's because it is. The Doctor works out that he has been there before and it is the planet Midnight. The Doctor goes to tell Belinda what is going on, and this is when the real chaos and panic starts to ensue, much like the original Midnight. However, in this case, they establish that the entity this time moves behind people's backs once they have off the other person who is causing the fear. So it's a fearmonger. Essentially, the same thing, just works in a little bit of a different way. Belinda figures out that the entity is at midnight, so to speak, so therefore no one should stand behind Alice, because if they were to stand behind Alice, then they would be the ones to die in a horrific manner. And that was the midnight point, so to speak, in this particular story. However, there was far too much panic going on, and they positioned themselves in the face of a clock. This results in one of the rescue mission ladies being off, so to speak. She stood behind Alice. Cassio decides to take matters into his own hands. He ordered that Shea steps down, and then he starts giving out the orders. This simple move caused a chain reaction of events and panic in total chaos, and nearly all of the crew die. The one thing that the Doctor notes is that Alice seems to be unaffected by the fact that the entity is behind her. He goes up to her, he starts talking to her, and he realizes this is because she is deaf and she cannot hear the creature whispering, which is why she hasn't been affected. He hears the creature whispering, he cries for a bit, and even the creature says his name. The entity says his name, apparently, even though we don't hear it out loud. And then he realizes Mercury will help move the entity off Alice's back. So they shoot the vents and Mercury pours out. We do not get to see the entity. It's definitely implied that it is some kind of corporeal type of creature, but it's mostly sort of shadow. They run, and the Doctor does what possibly is the most Doctor thing I've seen at this point from Ncuti. He decides he wants to see the creature. However, he doesn't, because Belinda convinces him to keep on running. Alice is able to escape as part of the rescue mission from the colony. However, the remaining people are unable to escape. And this is when they discover that Belinda now has the creature behind her. The Doctor fails to save Belinda, and Shea shoots Belinda, so that the creature would attach itself to her, and this results in throwing herself down the well. Belinda wakes up in the TARDIS, no idea how they got there. All is well with the Doctor and Belinda. However, the twist at the end is that the entity or the creature did not die in the well. It has gone and escaped the planet 6767. Could this be something that plays into the end in the finale? Okay, I am going to be straight up and honest with you in this review, and I'm going to be fair at the same time. I should imagine by now, after seeing me do plenty of reviews, that this is exactly what you would expect from me, and it will remain the same. There are many good points with this story. However, it is littered with a lot of bad points as well, in particular one big one. We've all covered, we'll cover those bad points like normal, but I think it's always good to start off with the positive first. The well is the closest that we've had in a very, very long time to a story that is reminiscent of what was once in Doctor Who. And I said that at the beginning. I opened that with that, and I'm sticking to that. It had all of the elements that I would consider the sci-fi aspect of Doctor Who. It's set 500,000 years in the future, and this is something that I feel like that we really not have had since Wild Blue Yonder. Not that I am a big fan of Wild Blue Yonder either. In fact, this is better than Wild Blue Yonder. This story has lots of features that does make it sci-fi. It has spaceships, it has the big laser guns, it has spacesuits. The planet itself is called Planet 6767, and it got devastated by galvanic radiation. Now, I would have liked, with the galvanic radiation aspect of this story, to play into it a lot more, other than wiping the planet out. I think they could have taken it a lot further than that, but they chose not to, because I think they wanted to focus on the horror aspect. Everything about this story really does scream sci-fi. It's good to see that Ncuti has finally got a semi-decent sci-fi story where the writing is a little bit better than what he has been getting. However, the semi-decent sci-fi story statement that I just made feels like a very low bar, because the quality, in my opinion, isn't that good. Okay, and I think in many respects that this story angered me, particularly to begin with, a little bit more than perhaps what it should have done, and that's because of the writing and the decision to set this on the planet midnight. I will say, though, it is way better than the other two stories that we've got. Now, I swear that RTD told us that, and I may have got this wrong actually, to not focus on anything that he has done in the past or something along those lines. I feel like he has said it before. So why are we getting Midnight? To me, this story is Midnight regurgitated, almost. Midnight for me was RTD's best story that he has ever written for Doctor Who. I will talk about this story someday in the future on this channel, but Midnight was fantastic because they had an unseen entity. They were in a very small space, and this entity was latching onto people and moving from person to person, and it was unpredictable as to where it was going to next, and using their words as its power, and it was learning all the time. And it was truly terrifying because there was no control over it, none whatsoever. Midnight is what we call in Doctor Who a bottled story. So if you're new to Doctor Who, this is what a bottled story is. It means it takes place in one place only, and it does not leave that place for the entirety of the story until it resolves, except for maybe at the beginning and of course naturally at the end. Midnight is a story that does not convolute itself. However, when you start introducing sequels to a bottled story, this is where you start creating problems, in my opinion. So you may have guessed, I don't know what would have given this away, but RTD and Sharma have created a sequel to the bottled story, Midnight. In my opinion, this is not needed, and many people surprisingly have stated the same thing on X, even the people who are sole defenders of the show. And the reason why it's not needed is because Midnight has its own mystique. It has its own fear factor. There was some stories in Doctor Who that just need to be left alone as standalone stories, and Midnight is one of them. Another example of that type of story would be Horror of Fang Rock. If you want to get back to classic, that is a story that you could probably never do a sequel to. The same logic also applies to aliens in Doctor Who. For example, the Autons, and no, I'm not saying that because I'm terrified of them, but other than connecting them to the Nestine consciousness, what else exactly do they do? How far do you take them until they become a cartoon parody, like with what they did with Mickey in Rose? And we've only ever seen the Autons 3 times in Doctor Who history. The reason why they're not used is because what else would you do with them? They don't speak, and they just shoot, and they're connected to a consciousness most of the time. Well, in at least 2 of the 3 stories. Another example are the Weeping Angels. I still, to this day, maintain that it was a big mistake for Stephen Moffat to bring back the Weeping Angels as a constant character. Because how far do you get with the Weeping Angels before they become comedy gold and limbs start falling off? And it's the same thing here. However, with Midnight, RTD had used words and played into paranoia. Using words this time would have totally given it away, so he had to go with something different. However, this did result in multiple deaths across the board. From the beginning of the story up until just before Shea described the planet and what it used to be like, I had this very distinct feeling that it felt like Series 4 with the "there's something on your back" lines that they used to do with Donna Noble. Then as soon as Shea starts describing what I thought sounded like a very pretty description of the planet 6767, I also thought, oh, that sounds like Midnight. Lo and behold, the reveal was immediately after that they were on Midnight. It was a facepalm moment for me. And then pretty much what resulted in the end was fairly predictable. And that's a shame because it had a lot going for it up until that point. It does ruin Midnight for me a little bit, because what they have done, RTD and Sharma, is they have unbottled Midnight and they've made it something bigger, which was never there to begin with. Its own fear factor was the fact that it was bottled and you couldn't see what was going on. It took away from the mystique that Midnight originally had, and it's probably going to change my perception now when I rewatch that particular story. And I think maybe because I've seen it as well, I know the urgency behind Midnight. I found the regurgitation of the plot in many respects, even though it was done differently, did not have that same urgency. I have things written down in my notes that I wrote down as a really, really good idea until the reveal of Midnight, and then everything just made sense as it became predictable. One of my favourite bits was the fact that Cassio went stark raving bonkers. This results in people dying, unfortunately, and how they died was more of a play on the word midnight. So others would turn around and whoever is behind her back, Alice's back, would be at the angle of midnight. I quite like that. That's good. I really do like that element. That being said, I would take this story any day over The Devil's Cord. And I still like a lot of elements that was in it, even though it was done differently. This story is also very 73 yards. There's something behind you, there's something terrifying behind you, just without the 73 yards in the distance, but you just cannot figure out what it is because you can't see it. I also like the fact that they have the entity moving behind them. I'm just not keen on the tie-in to Midnight. I think the story could have worked really well without it, but they went there. And I was also wondering if the well now convolutes Midnight a little bit. Maybe it's just something that I am misunderstanding within the story. It sounded like they were implying that it was the same entity, but I'm not entirely sure. The reason why I say that is because the planet gets wiped out with galvanic radiation. However, we get the implication in Midnight that this entity is extremely strong, so it could potentially survive the galvanic radiation. It also doesn't like mirrors, so it doesn't like seeing its reflection, so it destroys them. So doesn't that undo technically the whole premise of Midnight and the fact that it was a diamond planet? Maybe it's just me misunderstanding that, but please, can someone clarify that for me? And unless I am misremembering, I thought that Midnight, before its destruction, was already colonized by humans. So why would they have not heard of the planet Earth or humans? They didn't seem to have a clue. The story did keep in line with it being an extonic star, but there wasn't a reference made to the fact that it had been colonized before. It just seems very weird thing to miss out, because one of the main purposes of this story was that they were on a rescue mission to a colony of 35 people, and most of these people were not human. These people were not human. Surely they would have known its previous existence had a colony of human beings. Again, that could just be me misremembering Midnight. I will say though that I should have cottoned on, because a bit earlier they had the Toxic theme. Yes, the Toxic by Britney Spears came with the changing of the clothes sequence. And I also do not like the Doctor's line, "Girl, you're beginning to enjoy this now." This is more to do with the delivery though than anything else. He just holds on to the word girl for no reason. Girl, you're beginning to enjoy this now. Yeah. Mind you, that is pretty bad, but also having words like girl and babes. One of my favourite bits though is when Cassio says, "It's not appropriate to call me babes," to which he replies, "Okay, hun." However, I think Cassio is really saying what we're all thinking. Please stop with this babes, hun, darling, and girl. It feels like to me this is not how the Doctor speaks. This is how someone like RTD speaks. I do feel like We got it a bit less, though, and I wondered if that's because Sharma's influence was coming through just a little bit into the script. Now I'm going to contradict myself because I feel like she did not have much of a say in what she had to write whatsoever. It was a double team, but to me, the majority of all of this story screams RTD, not RTD and Sharma. Sharma has not written sci-fi before, and I think this is why RTD is perhaps also writing in this one. However, the majority of the story is sci-fi, so I think that perhaps Sharma's input were the more chatty and soap speaking moments rather than the sci-fi. I think the sci-fi is definitely more to do with RTD. I think also in this that the writing for Ncuti is calmer as well. He has a bit where he says, no, at the beginning. And that was when something was going wrong. And I was like, okay, that's very Doctor-like, but it's too little, too late. We should have been getting this very much within his second story at least. We should have started seeing it back then. We're not saying, just so you know, that every Doctor gets it in his first story. They don't. But it should have been much earlier at least. And I would say, even with Jodie, we got the impression she was trying to sound intelligent and like the Doctor, even though she's still a miscast. There were still things, though, that were very much out of character for the Doctor. And that was the promise to get her home. To her family. I think the level of sincerity that was delivered with this was probably not the right amount of sincerity. When the Doctor makes the promise to get someone home, normally it's a brush off remark because he knows that it could be a struggle to get someone home. We see that with the Peter Davison Doctor a fair bit, with Tegan. And, well, the first Doctor wouldn't even take Barbara and Ian home. So, I don't think it's within the character's remit to play it with such sincerity. I think Ncuti just played it too sincere. And I think he needed to brush it off in line with the other Doctors. But I suppose that's what happens when you're not allowed to focus on the past and talk about other Doctors. I think the beginning is way too soapy as well. I just want to go back to Doctor Who, where Doctor Who focuses on adventure, sci-fi, and history. That doesn't mean to say, though, that what the Doctor did in this is entirely bad. It's really nice touch, and I reckon this was probably Sharma, to see the Doctor using sign language. I think it's something that perhaps maybe they could have had the rest of the cast doing as well, instead of doing those projection screens on their suits that shows the word on the screen to the character. Alice can lip read, and I wish that they had done an on-screen interpretation with a little caption at the bottom for people who could not understand sign language, because there was a moment between Alice and the Doctor which was a very nice moment where they were not communicating verbally, they were communicating through sign only, but they did not do that. I thought it was a nice little touch, though, that they had the sign language included. And I think you could have included it more throughout, actually, even with Alice. And I know a lot of people like Rose Ayling-Ellis, and I think she is a big standout in this story. I do think she unintentionally upstages Ncuti and Verada. She is definitely not someone who I'd say is pulling faces in this story. I've been reading, just so you know, some of the comments since coming back to YouTube today, and some comments suggested face pulling, and I understand where those comments are coming from. However, in this case, for this particular story, she does not do this. She is very much reactionary because acting is reacting. I think that she is also relishing the fact that she does not have to rush this like she has to in Soapland, because in Soapland they have one angle, second angle, and a panning shot, and they have to get through it as quickly as they possibly can. Whereas in this, she can slow it down a bit more, so therefore she is able to focus on the text a bit more and get more into the character's head. And I think that suits her a lot. Her distress and her fear is very evident on her face, and I think she does very well. Interestingly, they kept her in one place except for the end. They didn't really move her around a lot. I think it would have been better then, if they were doing that, to have a smaller set. And the reason why I say that is because, well, she's got something behind her, and Midnight's premise is obviously also in a very small, compact area. I think it would have been good and more scary had they done something similar throughout, even though I'm not too keen on the plot being almost the same as Midnight. But if they're going to do it, then they might as well dedicate and do it well. I think perhaps this story could have also benefited from a smaller cast. I find that sometimes these types of story do benefit from that, because obviously you've got all these surplus characters that just serve one purpose, and that is to die. Now, there is one thing that I've noticed in this, and I hope this does not come back to shoot itself in the foot later. I didn't twig this in the last story, Lux, but it occurred to me for this one. One thing that seemed very apparent about the new series was the fact they were not going to be on planet Earth. So when they travel to the future, this particular planet Earth does not exist, and they never heard of it. Now, in the previous story, they traveled to the past and the planet Earth exists. So I'm hoping that it's not going to convolute itself. I quite like the idea that Earth does not exist, and this is why they cannot get back to Earth. I suppose you could say, well, he has a time machine, which is why they're doing it like this. I think they should have gone with Earth does not exist in the past, the present, or the future. And how on earth were they going to get Belinda home? I'm not liking Belinda. I think she's way too grumpy. And I think this is all to do with the portrayal. I don't think it's the writing. I genuinely do think it is the portrayal. I gave Ncuti a lot of chances, and I concluded that it was a mixture of the portrayal and the writing that led to his miscast. In this case, though, I would say the writing for Belinda is pretty average. It's not the worst writing I've seen. It's not the best I've seen. But it's certainly something that an actress can take and work on and make better. I can't really work out right now off the top of my head what it is, but she's constantly got a scowl on her face. She doesn't change her facial expression all that much, and I would want her to have more energy. I want her to match Ncuti's energy, and I can't believe I'm saying that, but I feel like he's giving 110%, which is too much, and she's giving it 20%, which is not enough. And I really cannot believe I just said that, because he did cry for absolutely no reason at all, again, in this story. And by the way, I did read the article where RTD says you don't tell an actor not to cry. RTD. Yes, you can tell an actor to not cry. A director can do that. In the case of bringing a story to life, it is within the director's imagination. So if the director does not want the Doctor to be seen crying, then the Doctor shouldn't be crying. It can be stopped. And the reason why he was crying is because he hears the whisper, and Alice cannot hear the whisper, and the entity says the Doctor's name. Apparently all of this is a reason to cry. The Doctor also says, my old head. I don't know who wrote that line, but this, to me, I would never associate with this version of the Doctor. He plays the character way too young. He does not play the character old whatsoever. And also, he has a lot of emotional baggage that he is supposed to be getting rid of, right? Okay, oh sorry, no. He got rid of it when he bi-generated it and left it with the other Doctor. Boy, oh boy, so he's got some mega emotional baggage though, hasn't he? Still, one thing I will praise for this series is the lack of the use of the sonic screwdriver, or as I call it, the shoe driver. He's used it about 3 times, maybe 4, so about once each story. Maybe, just maybe, RTT has listened to his YouTube critics. I highly doubt it though. They use the sonic shoe driver to activate the computer, and he says it's magic. 500,000 years in the future, and the Doctor passes something off as magic. Maybe 500,000 years in the past, he could have passed it off as magic because that would have been the easiest way to explain it, but in the future? Now the Doctor, though, for once, does save people in this, although not his companion, who he leaves on the floor dying in the end. One of the twists that I like is the fact that the entity attaches itself to Belinda, and I thought, oh, this is a good moment for the Doctor to focus on saving his companion. He manages to save Alice and part of the crew, so it would be really great if he could rescue Belinda. However, in this case, predictably, that does not happen. A big downer. Shea, the captain of the rescue mission, shoots Belinda in order to save her from the entity, and then the entity attaches itself to her and she throws herself down the well in order to take the entity out. Now, in many respects, this does prevent the Doctor from using weapons, which, you know, I don't like the Doctor doing in many respects. I'm okay with that. However, the Doctor then leaves her behind and he chases Shea. Yes, he does shout instructions as to how to save her, but he's not the one doing it. I would have preferred it if he had stayed with Belinda to save her. And I just thought of something else, okay? Whilst saying that, that surely does then create a plot hole, because it would have been better if Simolin had chased after Shea, because when we see her later on her ship, it's implied that the entity has attached itself to her. But that makes no sense, because she was not with Shea when Shea had thrown herself down the well. It was the Doctor that was with her. So surely that should mean that the entity had attached itself to the Doctor like it did in Midnight. I do like the idea that the entity does not stay on planet 6767 and that it attaches itself to another person. It's a pretty cool reveal, but I think the story just sort of convoluted itself at that point. No one did a continuity check on that to make sure that was correct. And also, another massive plot hole. How did the Doctor and Belinda get back to the TARDIS at the end? She just wakes up and suddenly they're both there in the TARDIS. I haven't yet talked about the well. They make a really big point in this story about the well, other than the fact that we have the unseen entity. The unseen entity comes from the well, and it doesn't really serve any other purpose other than Shea throwing herself down it. They really did miss a trick there. I would have liked them to have gone down into the well. In actual fact, that's what I thought they were going to do. I thought they were going to go into the well to look for something, but they didn't. So other than the purpose that it served, I really didn't see the point in it. It's a bit of a MacGuffin in many respects without being a MacGuffin. It could have been something like The Descendants, just not as vile. I think it's called The Descendants. We do see Mrs. Flood again. We see her towards the end, and I'm beginning to wonder if she is after the Vindicator because she needs to get somewhere. And the reason why I say that is because she's asking about the Doctor and whether or not he had the Vindicator. Now, it could be pure coincidence. However, it was very unsurprising that she turned up because we were told that she was going to be there in every single story. And I would say, though, it's probably the most straight-laced that Anita Dobson has been, so we are starting to see a bit of variety come in with the characters, so that is good. One thing that they are trying to do with the series that they haven't really done since Classic is they are trying to have the stories run into each other, so there is a tie-in, and they're doing it through the costumes. I do not like the costume changes for the Doctor. However, they are making it perfectly clear that each story is taking place after the previous story, so it is being tied in. I just wish that they would do it more from when they re-enter the TARDIS rather than perhaps doing it 10 minutes later after their previous adventure. I would like to see the transition from them entering the TARDIS straight into the next course of action. And I don't think there would be a problem with them doing that. I do wish that they would have much more of a recognisable costume for Ncuti, though. They pretty much have already indirectly admitted it by doing all the promotional stuff with his long brown coat. The reason why they're doing it is because it is a key identifier, and now that is going to be associated with his Doctor. There's one thing though about this particular story, and I'm going back to the writing. The Doctor says this. He says, "Imagine I don't know anything about this mission." He says that after showing them the psychic paper. Why would he do that? He has just infiltrated a rescue mission, which I like the idea of, by the way. And then he says, "Imagine I don't know anything about this mission." Surely that would just give him away. Surely it would do that. It's not something that I would expect from the Doctor. When he goes into a situation, he asserts his authority and makes it look like he knows exactly what he is talking about. Surely the Doctor would have got that information another way. I'm just saying. It's indirectly telling them, I don't know anything, so tell me this information. All these language changes to the Doctor that have also been made. It's no wonder Ncuti struggled with what his character should be. He has no consistency within the writing. Now, speaking of consistency, I have an issue with the music in this story. I rarely discuss the music in the story. However, I found it too imposing. It was too loud. And the reliance on it for the jump scares was really strong. The first jump scare, it was too loud. I had to go back several times because I missed what had happened due to the music being so distracting. I think this is a common issue that you get with these types of story, particularly, with the way that it's being told in this way. There's something behind you. It's creepy, it's scary, so therefore the music becomes intense, and the music becoming intense obviously plays with your heart, and this does that in order to frighten you. However, the build up to the jump scare was just too much. It needed to be a little bit softer, a bit more dangerous, and a lot darker. I also think that the entity behind Alice's back needed just a little bit more distinction. Now, I don't know if this is because the lighting is at play here, but you can barely see it when it appears. I feel like it just needed more definition, even though we still shouldn't see exactly what it is. That's just my opinion, though. I understand that for some people, what we had on the screen would just be enough, but I spent years watching Japanese and Korean horrors and Southeast Asia horrors, so I have a high expectation, maybe unnaturally so, for this story. This story in this series so far is probably the best one. I would expect to see a spike in the overnight ratings. Easter is over. This is much more akin to Doctor Who than it has been in recent years. This also has Rose Ayling-Ellis in it, and a lot of people like Rose, so they will watch it just for her. However, like myself, there are people that don't seem to be overly impressed that this appears to be a sequel to Midnight, or they felt that it was just not needed. Now, I don't want to put words into people's mouths. If you like the idea that it is a sequel to Midnight, then you're more than entitled to that opinion, and if you liked it, that's absolutely fine too. I also know that a lot of people did like this story. I'm not impressed by the idea that there is a sequel to Midnight. Now, obviously I have explained my reasons for that, and Midnight should really just be left alone. However, he has now taken that and he's moved beyond it, and he has opened it out. And because he did that, that has unfortunately knocked a lot of points off this story. And this story got off to a really good start for me. I would have liked to have seen more points being made about the well itself. It's very clearly explained that they are also in a diamond mine, so I would have liked to have seen more play into that. I think they could have also tapped more into the psychology and paranoia rather than dedicating moments to the soapy parts at the beginning, and got on with telling the story rather than doing those bits. The ending was a little bit too predictable. It rang true with similarities that played into Midnight and how the character was taken down in that. The Doctor was pretty much ineffective again, although not as ineffective as he normally is, and I wonder if Sharma convinced him to make him a bit more of a hero in this one. I mean, convinced RTD to make him more of a hero in this one, although I don't hold out high hopes. Out of all of my notes of all 3 stories so far in this series, this one has a lot more good points. As I have said, this is more akin to Doctor Who. It's just a shame that I had to bust open Midnight in order to do it. Thankfully, it wasn't too meta. I'm guessing we'll be saving that for Eurovision. All I have to say is, imagine spending all this Disney money to have a show in Doctor Who in name only, and wait 13 stories for something that was just about semi-decent. It was consistently better than last 2 stories. I give this a 6.5 out of 10. That's what I think. Let me know what you think. Please keep it a friendly debate in the comments. Chat about it, don't chat about it. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you tomorrow at 4 p.m. Bye bye.